Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 7 team. Number 7 in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Washington Commanders, who just a year ago, I'm pretty sure were my 32nd ranked team. If they weren't 32nd, they were 31st. I can't quite recall. I should have checked before doing this, but what a turnaround. It's amazing the difference a great quarterback and a great offensive play caller can make to an organization, because that's what you saw Commanders fans last year was Jayden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury just having chemistry that takes usually years and years and years to develop. Amazing. And now they're running it back here. They added Deebo Samuel to the receiving room. They added Laremy Tunsil as their left tackle. They committed to this offensive side of the football here for Jayden Daniels. The only issue is, as of right now, the recording of this video, it's 7 in the morning. Terry McLaurin is still holding out. Is he going to be on the team? Are they going to trade him away? If they do trade him away, it does change this ranking. It does bump them down, I believe, to 9th. It may be lower than that. I got to go back and do the math again, but I will put it in the editor's note in the comment section if Terry McLaurin is indeed traded, where they rank, and I'll probably change the thumbnail. So you guys will have that to go on. But as of now, this is just how it is. They're number 7, and it's really led by the offense. Dan Quinn, great culture building, great job creating a defense that was at least good enough to keep them in games, to allow the offense to outscore other people. They added Von Miller. They brought back Bobby Wagner. They did lose Jonathan Allen, but it's not that significant of a loss if you go and watch my Minnesota Vikings video. They drafted Trey Amos, so now they've added some depth to a relatively weak secondary, talent-wise. But it's all on Dan Campbell. How's Dan Campbell going to put these guys in position to succeed? How much is he turning over to defensive coordinator Joe Witt? And how is Cliff Kingsbury going to be able to run it back and repeat what he did last year? Dan Quinn, excuse me. I'm saying Dan Campbell. I just did the Detroit Lions video. If you watched it, if you subscribed, you would know. But it's Dan Quinn, the head coach. He's my 14th ranked head coach, Dan Quinn. Just, kind of like just on the upper part of the midway point, which I think is, for a defensive-minded coach, is a pretty good spot for him to be in, because he did a really good job, kind of like what you saw with Dan Campbell in Detroit, where it was this culture shift. Jim Harbaugh did it last year as well with the Chargers. They took teams that were really downtrodden, and he took a roster that a lot of people didn't have a lot of faith in. Everyone had them either last or second to last or something, saying, Jayden Daniels is a project. He's got a lot of work to do. The defense isn't very good. I don't know who they're going to stop. This is probably going to be a long season where they're mostly focused on development. And they were a 1 game away from being in the Super Bowl, which, as a Giants fan, this is painful. This is painful to praise what this team did and to put them this high. But, Dan Quinn, he jumping back into the head coaching position after spending all that time rebuilding his reputation in Dallas, changing up his defensive scheme, adjusting it, becoming this super aggressive play caller in Dallas. Did have struggles against the run, which have sort of carried over here with just how the team building aspect goes from the defensive side of the ball, that he's kind of continued over here now that he's really overseeing it more. A lot of the same patterns have seemingly been repeated. The one thing he didn't repeat was the linebacker, the lack of skill at linebacker. Having Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu there, he really found a nice little cauterized combination between the two of them. Different type of blitzing threats and all that in the A and the B gaps. Made a world of a difference for this defense that was lacking talent and still to a degree kind of is. I know they brought in Von Miller to sort of anchor the one edge position. It's just a matter of how many snaps he can actually take. Even though he is the best player, you do fear that he's not going to take all the snaps that they would probably need someone of his caliber compared to the caliber of the other players that they have. And then combining with Joe Witt, we'll see how much levity he gives to Joe Witt in his second season here. He brought Joe Witt with him from Dallas, and I thought Joe Witt settled in pretty well. I thought the defense was disciplined. You know, they were still talent lacking. There were some players that developed pretty well. You know, Mike Sanders still did pretty good. You know, so there were some bright spots in the role of the defensive coordinator, even though Dan Quinn is kind of the defensive coordinator as much as Joe Witt is. We'll see how much more he gives to Joe Witt here. I really like some of the guys on their staff, like Ryan Kerrigan and Ken Norton Jr. Some good quality minds in there. You know, Ken Norton Jr.'s got some experience as a defensive coordinator as well. So it's always good to have guys with that kind of pedigree there as position coaches. And so we'll see if Joe Witt can, you know, boost his way up, you know, get a little bit more of a say on what's going on the defense side of the ball, get more freedom to maybe call the defense, set up some strategies for the defense. We'll see how much Dan Quinn is willing to give that up, because the best position for Dan Quinn to be in, I've said this for multiple videos, but it's especially true with defensive-minded head coaches, is you allow yourself to become like the CEO. And we saw having freedom to do what you need to do and the benefits of that from Cliff Kingsbury on the offense side of the ball. You know, when this hire happened, I know a lot of people criticized it, and I think they criticized Cliff Kingsbury, you know, for the same reasons why they criticized Josh McDaniels and guys like that, is because just the sort of lack of success they had as head coaches. And even last year with Kingsbury, I was like, this has the makings of a Josh McDaniels situation where, you know, he kind of was uninspiring as a head coach, fell out of favor culturally with the fans and all that kind of crap, but organizationally they kind of know what they have. He's a great offensive mind, and he could probably come in and make something happen right away, and he definitely did. He's my number 2 ranked offensive coordinator. He's just short of number 1 for right now, but he's got all the makings to be number 1, and he's playing himself into getting another opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL. Now, like I said, it probably ends the way that it ended with Josh McDaniels, where he gets another opportunity in a couple of years, a year or two. There's a lot of quick turnover, especially if this offense continues to excel the way it has, and Jayden Daniels continues to develop the way that he showed the really accelerated develop that Jayden Daniels had last year. That Kingsbury gets a head coaching job, and it could all just kind of fall apart again. And then he just ends up like Josh McDaniels. I think that that's a great place to be in, though, is like a top 5 offensive coordinator forever that an organization gets to keep. You know, it fits perfectly when you have a head coach like Dan Quinn there. And there's some really good offensive coaches on the staff, particularly Anthony Lynn, who's got some head coaching experience, some offensive coordinator experience. He's coming in and working with the running backs. Now, there's some issue here that's come up for the last couple of days where they may be shopping Brian Robinson. I don't know why. You know, I guess because, you know, they got that rookie who came in who looked pretty good in a preseason game. But I don't know that's enough to get rid of Brian Robinson. We'll get to him eventually, who's pretty much a bell cow back, and he really helps out with this offense. Now, I understand they want Cliff Kingsbury's offense in particular. It's the air raid offense, right? It's spread him out. You put the ball down the field. That's why there's been a lot of focus on getting wide receivers in there. You know, but the Terry McLaurin situation still not solved. Probably going to be the next couple of days. Apparently, some progress has been made since, you know, this is as of this recording at least. You know, and then they go and get Deebo Samuel. They draft Luke McCaffrey. They get Noah Brown. You know, you have Zach Ertz, a great receiving tight end. You have Austin Eckler in the backfield. So I get why maybe Brian Robinson, who's just a straight up traditional running back, would not be ideal for this offense. But you also, I think, what they showed last year is that Kingsbury does probably need to introduce a much more traditional run game to the offense to be able to finish teams off successfully. Because I think when they got into these shootout matches and they were unable to really send somebody out there and grind down the defense and grind down the opposing linebackers in the front 7 to then open up those opportunities, when they were unable to do that against teams like Philadelphia in the playoffs, in the AFC Championship game, it did show that that's probably the thing holding them back. So I think them shopping Brian Robinson, if it is true, just comes across as a little irresponsible, because he would be a really great feature to have in their backfield. Overall, though, I feel like Dan Quinn, if this team can prove they're not like this one-year wonder and they got all the pieces in place to be not that there's no reason why he shouldn't get into that fringe top 10 head coaching area. And because he is damn good at the culture building aspect. You know, he's had a lot of success in the past. It's just a matter of getting over that hump, and can a defensive coach really do that? The only one that truly has been able to do that at a consistent level has been Mike Tomlin. You know, I'm thinking of like defensive minded head coaches that have had elongated levels of success the last, 10 years, 10, 15 years. There's really been consistent winning. It's been Pete Carroll and it's been Mike Tomlin. Dan Quinn had the Falcons playing really well for a long time, but you just wonder if, their ceiling was, hey, you get to one Super Bowl and you blow it, and then that's it. You don't really ever get close again. Got close here. Can he build on what they had? And is he able to build a system that, when inevitably, if it succeeds the way that it did last year, you're going to have turnover at the offensive coordinator position? Are you going to have a system and a culture established well enough that you can afford to do that? We've seen it with Philadelphia where maybe the culture wasn't strong enough when they lost Shane Steichen. We touched upon this in the last video with the Detroit Lions. It wasn't strong enough, and then they had to sort of almost do like a soft rebuild there for a bit. Detroit's in that situation. I think Dan Quinn is approaching that situation. So how he builds a level of consistency in the culture aspect of this team to create a winning culture, to allow the offense and the defense to establish themselves with very specific identities that can create a level of continuity as these coaches sort of funnel out. Because the expectation has to be that as you continue to build this roster, as you continue to build this team, and you continue to have a level of success, you anticipate your coordinators are out the door. So that's the real task, I believe, for Dan Quinn this year, is to take what he did last year and build upon it successfully. So in that way, you don't lose the enthusiasm of the roster and the fan base. You don't lose the faith of the overall locker room in what you're trying to build. You drastically overachieve the way that you did. That creates a groundswell amongst free agents, for example, amongst agents of other players that want them to get on this team, try to manipulate where they get drafted and all that kind of stuff, the way that it happens every year. You want to be a destination place, inevitably, moving into the new stadium and all that. You want this to be a desirable place to go, and you've accelerated that process to a dangerous level now, where now you have maybe more expectations than you should have coming into this season. So it makes the job that much harder for the head coach to sort of keep everyone level-headed, to keep everyone, keep their heads from getting too overinflated, keep them focused, keep them hungry for success, and really use the failures of the NFC Championship game, the failures you had sort of in the middle of the season last year, as like motivational points. That's what I feel Dan Quinn really needs to do, and I think he's the right guy for the job for this. I think he's got a good enough reputation built up amongst enough people, myself included, where there is a faith here that this can be sustained to some degree here. How much further in the playoffs they can get. There's not much further they can get in the playoffs. So from a longevity in keeping the season alive standpoint, you've kind of pigeonholed yourself a bit here. But I think the fan base has a level of, how do I say it? They're level-headed enough to know that maybe last year was a bit of an outlier, and that just make the playoffs again, look good, and then see where you can continue to build on the weaknesses they have, because they do have some weaknesses out here that we're going to get to. Got to cut myself off here and jump in with an ad break that doesn't exist because I don't have the subscribers yet. Or maybe I do, and in the last couple of videos you guys have subscribed, and now I have them, but as of right now I don't. So be a leader. Show these other people out there what they're supposed to do, which is subscribe and like, and that helps everybody, and eventually I'll make some money. I can move to another country. I live in Canada. I can move to a real country like America maybe and make American money and not this monopoly money they keep sending me when I go to the bank. And one of them isn't Jayden Daniels, who comes in. He's my number 5 quarterback coming into the league this year, and that's as a passer. And that's not something that I expected from Jayden Daniels coming into this season. Now, notoriously, I had Jayden Daniels as like my quarterback 5 or quarterback 6 last year because this just wasn't an aspect of his game that I expected at all. And I don't think a lot of people expected it. I think people expected him to come in and sort of be this, this version of what we saw from Lamar Jackson in his rookie and sophomore season, where it wasn't a lot of really inventive passing. It wasn't this great arm talent, but it was just a weapon on the offense side of the ball that was good enough throwing the football in certain areas of the field that you were able to scheme up properly and give him enough running options throughout the game that it raised the floor of the offense's success to a point where you were going to be a dynamic offense every week. You were just going to be kind of limited in what you could do throwing the ball, which would inevitably be your downfall. There wasn't a lot of that with Jayden Daniels. The first game of the season was brutal. He looked the way that kind of I think everyone expected him to. But then every week after that, he just built and he built and he built. And it was one great performance after one great performance. The confidence that he had throwing the ball downfield, the aggressiveness, the patience, the pocket presence. Every single week it got better and better and better. As he got more comfortable with the offense, as he got more comfortable with the play calling and the scheme, as he got more comfortable with all things involved, it was just better and better and better. Then there was a bit of a lull. There was a bit of a lull about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through the season, and people remember this. It was like, oh boy, okay, maybe he's sort of settled in. People have figured him out. He doesn't have that next level in him. And then to close out the season, he went right back. Boom. Reached a new level. What that showed is a level of mental maturity, football IQ, and commitment in the film room, commitment on the practice field, to understanding where the weaknesses were, understanding where the detriments were, where the low points were, and working on those, and then up to Cliff Kingsbury to find the true strengths and to focus on them and really implement them throughout the game plan more often and develop counters to it. Anticipate what the defense was going to do based upon what you've been building throughout the season and have a counter action for that. And a lot of that came from play action, where he was elite at that. And when he was kept clean, it also scared people away from blitzing because they wanted to play some quarterback spy on him. So when he was kept clean, he was great. And when he was blitzed, he executed at such a high level because he was able to get out of the pocket. He was able to escape and buy himself some time where he wasn't facing a lot of pressure. He was able to create time for himself. And the defenses were just hopeless against that. Even when he was under pressure, he was able to escape, use his legs, get those running plays done. From in the short areas, he was shockingly not that good, which is odd because you would expect him from like a check down perspective, just playing fast, that would be an area he'd really excel in. But his area of where he excelled was in 5-step drops, throwing the ball, 10 to 15 to 16 yards down the field to Terry McLaurin or to whoever, Zach Ertz, etc. Even his deep ball was pretty good. That wasn't an elite level deep ball. There's other quarterbacks in the league that threw the ball deep a lot better than he did. But man, he had some piss ropes that he threw out there a couple times that were just awe-inspiring. And it legitimately created the conversation of maybe he was the best quarterback. Now, there is arguments that have been made that because he had all that experience in college football, he took so many reps, that naturally he would have been easier transition, which I can agree to a certain extent that is true, and that maybe, introducing everyone, if you introduced everyone into the league, everyone would sort of have like a level of progression on how quickly they would be good enough, like a quality starter. And obviously, I think Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix, because of how much time they spent in college, would have been in the top of that list. And then, work your way towards the bottom with Drake May at North Carolina sort of being last in that to sort of come out. Penix being up there as well. I think that's reasonable because they spend so much time in college. However, and I'm a big Bo Nix guy, as you guys saw, or as you guys are going to see, because he hasn't come up yet. And Denver hasn't come up yet. And we're at number 7. So you know how highly I'm going to think of him. Jayden Daniels, he played at like an elite veteran level, not just like an experienced young player level. And I think that distinction has to be made to be fair to him, is that not only did he completely overachieve the expectations in general, but he overachieved the expectations of even the most pro Jayden Daniels supporter coming into last season. And he did that by executing in all levels of what makes you good at this position. And we'll get to the running aspect shortly, but his ability to execute with these receivers, work the ball down the field, it was just masterclass. And it's a shame that he is flirting with the idea right now, to no fault of his own, of losing his best weapon in Terry McLaurin. Because with Terry McLaurin, this is the 6th or 7th best weapons group that they have in the entire league. Like, it's a really good group. Them adding Deebo Samuel was huge. Them bringing back the guys they brought back. But they need to make sure that Terry McLaurin is on this team in week 1. I don't get the trepidation in paying him. Just pay him. 82 catches, almost 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, 24 successful contested catches, almost a 71%. One of the best contested catch guys in the entire league last year. 135.3 passer rating when targeted. Worked all levels down the field perfectly. As perfect as you can get. And is a true number 1 outside receiver. 84% of his snaps were taken out wide. Only about 16% was taken from the slot. He played like the epitome of a number 1 wide receiver in the league. Now, are there detriments to his game? Of course. The run after the catch thing is a bit of an issue. He really executed through the double teams, the drops. He had 5 drops, almost a 6% drop rate. Which is, I guess, fine. You'd like it to be under 5% if you can help it. There's plenty of players out there that can achieve that. So you hope you can clean that aspect up a little bit, but only 5 drops in a season. Considering what he did as a contested catch guy, I feel like that kind of cancels that out. Because that's telling me that he was out there making a lot of big plays, and then maybe like a mental lapse here or there was just costing him a little bit. I can imagine them losing him. Because he comes out, he's fast, he's got some length, he's quick off the ball, he's got great release, he runs great routes at all levels, great double moves, can hit the quick triple move, stop on a dime. You can't just find guys like this. These are the kind of guys you pay. But I don't really understand what's really going on here. It's only a couple extra million a year. Just pay the goddamn guy. It's crazy. The Giants fan in me is like, good, don't pay him. Don't pay him. Get rid of him. And then watch how much they drop off. Because now Deebo's your number 1 receiver. Not taking anything away from Deebo Samuel. But, he left San Francisco because he was getting paid too much and he was injury prone. That's just the reality of it. But he's a great guy when you get the ball in his hands. Physical player. He just can't stay healthy. You can mix him up everywhere. You can put him in the backfield a little bit like San Francisco did. Have some success doing that. Gadget plays. Big time physical slot receiver. Will get out there. He'll block for you. He'll run some good routes. Not a very contested catch guy considering his physicality. But that was just last year. Maybe he can improve on that. But he doesn't have to be a contested catch guy in this offense. He needs to be like a quick operating guy. You get the ball in his hands quick and then he makes guys miss, gets physical, but he needs to stay healthy. He needs to just not be made of chandelier the way that he has been for most of his career. Now there's concern that he gets overworked, that he gets put in situations they shouldn't have been put in by San Francisco, particularly over the middle of the field, running the ball, all that kind of stuff, end arounds, flat out running back zone runs, stuff like that. Sure. I feel like here he'll be a straight up wide receiver in the air raid offense. I think he fits right. He'll fit right in. He'll find us a good little spot for himself. He's a good number 2 receiver when he's, when he's healthy. Borderline number 1. I don't know that he's got enough recovery in him at this point to be a number 1 receiver, but I think going up against the opposing team's number 2 corner, particularly going to be in single coverage a lot if they maintain Terry McLaurin, I think you got a huge advantage here of having Deebo Samuel. Particularly the RPOs, he can get open pretty quickly, and then he's going to catch the ball. He's going to get physical. He's going to get you some physical yards in the short areas in particular. And then he's going to hit a guy with a double move and beat him deep because he's going to run. He's going to short route, hit you with the double move on a play action, and then boom, you got a big play out of him. So having that variety with your 2 bookend wide receivers, 2 completely different styles, 2 completely different body types, 2 completely different skill sets, it's a great variety to have for Jayden Daniels, because now, depending on what kind of offense you're playing against, you can sort of mix and match the game plan up here and plan for one guy to have a bigger game than another just based on what the opposing defense looks like from their secondary perspective. And then you throw in Noah Brown, who's a great number 3 wide receiver. You'd hate for him to be thrust into a situation where he has to be wide receiver 2. But as wide receiver 3 is a guy you can mix and match, put him on the outside, put him in the slot. You can do all these things with him. I think it just opens up another aspect of the offense that we saw him do last year. And then they have Luke McCaffrey going into his second season, who, for all intents and purposes, is going to get some opportunities here. Though they did bring in Michael Gallup and KJ Osborne. They did pick up rookie Jalen Lane. So there's going to be some competition there. Chris Moore, you can't forget about him either, for that wide receiver 4 role. So you hope that Luke McCaffrey can sort of take the second year by the horns and take that next step. But there's certainly some veteran options here for them as well, if they just need to get some experience on the field and get a nice floor, where you kind of know what you get out of the guy. I think Gallup and Osborne can present those things for you. Then you got another veteran out there, Zach Ertz. You don't really have a whole lot behind him, though. You got Ben Sinnott, who you drafted last year, who, Zach Ertz, as long as he's playing pretty well, you're not going to beat him out, especially in this type of offense where they're not playing a lot of big personnel. They're going to be focusing on having the best receiving threats out there. Zach Ertz is that guy to the T, so it's pretty much his job to lose at this point when he wants to leave the team, pretty much, unless Sinnott or somebody else in that tight end room significantly steps up. And then the running backs, you got Austin Eckler, one of the best receiving running backs in the last decade. It's a role that he's carved out for himself, mastered. He's been a decent, straight up between the tackles, traditional running back. But his size and stuff like that has always kind of worked against him. So the best thing he's always done is you spread the team out and then you use him in the receiving game. Maybe spread him out, make the defense get small, and then run some inside zones with him and all that kind of stuff, which fits this offense really well. My concern is what they're going to do when they need to finish games off, like I said before. And when you have Brian Robinson, who is still a decent receiving back, but he's just not like an air raid receiving back, if that makes sense. There's other offenses where he'd be looked at as a much better receiving back option, a much better third down running back option than he is in this offense. So maybe that's sort of the mindset here. I don't have the rookie here represented just because it's sort of like he's just in the mix ratings wise. I can't use a preseason performance to just magically boost up his overall rating that I gave him leading into this based on his college tape. So it is what it is there. But it's such a good group. It's such a good group that really fits what this offense wants to be. It's just your fear is that if you start losing some bodies here, because Terry McLaurin contract's not great. Got to fix the contract situation. If you don't fix that, then you got injury-prone Deebo, to where now if you don't have both of these guys, now Noah Brown's your number 1 wide receiver, and you're probably running Noah Brown and Michael Gallup on the outside. And now you're down to being one of the worst weapons groups in the whole league. So it's one that, their top 2 guys though, are good and really give them a tremendous boost and make this group overall so much better, it's a slippery slope to have these two guys in their two situations be the thing that's leading this weapons group. So there is a real scenario where the bottom completely falls out under this, and then Jayden Daniels is left where he doesn't have a whole lot to work with here. And then you're really desperate for a Luke McCaffrey breakout season, or you're really desperate for Jalen Lane to be that rookie sensation that you get from rookie wide receivers sometimes, like Puka Nacua, for example. You are banking on him having to be that now, which is very unfair. So it's slippery, but as it stands, it's very impressive. Very, very impressive. This is what I'm talking about with the running back room. Brian Robinson, he gets an 85 grade from me. They're between him and Austin Eckler, they're the middle of the league running back room. But man, can Brian Robinson, when given the right situation, he can be a great finisher out there. It's just, you look at him last year, he didn't do worse. This is his numbers here they had last year are pretty much the numbers he gets every year. About 7 to 800 yards, 4.2 to 4.5 yards a carry, about 8-9 touchdowns. Not this big play threat by any sense, but that's not why you have him. That wasn't the reason why you picked him up to begin with when they did pick him up back a couple of years ago in the draft out of Alabama. He's an Alabama running back to his core, which means, much like Najee Harris before him, he's the guy that you turn around, you hand the ball off to, and he punishes the opposing defense. He plays physical, hard-nosed, run-it-down-your-throat football. That's what he was bred to do in college. And when you bring him into this league and you put him in this kind of offense, he does have a very specific role now that he needs to fill out. He can't be like a variety guy like he can in a West Coast offense, for example. He needs to be somebody who, gets used sparingly throughout games, but then in the fourth quarter is your feature of the offense. He's the guy that when you get that lead, when you have that, that 8 to 13 point lead, 8 to 14 point lead, you're at that 2-score lead area. He's the guy you have to turn around, hand the ball off to, and let him wear this team down. Run the clock out, because you can play fast. You can come out, throw the ball deep, throw the ball down the field, run it down, run a 2-minute offense with tremendous success. Run a 4-minute offense, tremendous success. But what about 8-minute offense? The best kind of offense, the one that gets talked about the least, is that offense that finishes games, that puts away an opponent, that has the opponent down with your foot on their neck and you stomp them out, rather than allowing them these weird opportunities to get up because you're trying to do too much. You're still playing fast. You're leaving them with too much time. You're opening yourself up to where if you make a mistake now, it's a much larger mistake. You need Brian Robinson Jr. on this team to be the finishing guy here. And they have so many different guys. Austin Eckler, Jayden Daniels, just a fantastic addition to this group. Jayden Daniels gives them a huge boost in this game. I would love to see a situation where you have Jayden Daniels and Brian Robinson Jr. just working together the way that you see Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry do it last year. I would love to see that be a feature of their offense. Now, you don't want to take away Jayden Daniels' ability to throw the ball. You want him to continue to build on that, but that it's there. That it's there a lot faster than Baltimore knew it was there with Lamar Jackson. So you really want to use Jayden Daniels' ability in that sense, and you mix him in here where now you got a back that can punish everybody, but then you got the finesse of Jayden Daniels. I would love to see a situation where they got both Robinson and Eckler on the field at the same time. Sort of like what you see Detroit do with Gibbs and Montgomery. I think that could work out really well in this offense. So, we'll see how this all ends up turning out, but this does seem, these numbers here, this is the kind of back that Brian Robinson's always been, and that's okay. He get 180 carries, almost 800 yards, just short of 800. Call it 800. Margin for error on a roundup error. I think you can get him 50 more carries in a season, get him to over 1,000 yards. I think that your offense will actually be ironically taken to a different level, to a much higher level, and you'll be able to probably finish off some of these harder opponents that you get off these great starts against, so you're able to put them away more efficiently. Now we're on to the offensive line, and it's a tale of two different offensive lines. Now we got to talk about Sam Cosmi, who got that injury late in the season last year. And word is he'll be ready, best case scenario, the end of November from the looks of it, if what I'm reading is correct. You know, all that Washington fans, you know, who follow all the beat writers and all that stuff, put in the comment section what they've heard. But I heard end of November, early December. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but I know he won't be ready to start the season. And I know that when he does come back, it's probably going to be a little rushed. So he's just not going to quite be the guy that you need him to be, which is why 78, 74, and he's not in the starting lineup right now. I want to get that out of the way. Nonetheless, I still have them as a borderline top 10 pass blocking offensive line because of the addition of all-pro left tackle Laremy Tunsil, who they stole from Houston. Just a magical trade that they made. Now, Tunsil last year did have some struggles. He took 19 penalties. A lot of them were false starts. Now, there's a lot of analysis you can do about what Houston was doing as an offense, and they were a little uninventive last year, which was giving an edge to these edge rushers, so him trying to get ahead of them a little bit, you know, messing with the cadences and all that stuff. You know, maybe got in his head a little bit, trying to be too good at times. But 660 snaps, still only gave up 2 sacks. It's just the 19 penalties that are a little rough that you want to hopefully that he can clean up here. You know, but in this air raid offense, you know it's going to be spread out, so there's probably the prospect of there being blitzing, especially with Jayden Daniels back there. I don't know how high that's going to be because teams are going to be running a lot of quarterback spy. They're not going to be running a lot of man coverage because they're not going to want to be in a situation where where their defender's eyes are off the quarterback because of the running threat. So that stuff's really going to help Tunsil. He's not going to have to, you know, worry about all that too much. So those penalties should be easily cut in half this season, if not cut down to a third. You know, that's what you'd really like because his ability is still like, man, 660 snaps, only 2 sacks given up, 19 pressures. Like the guy's he's still got it. And no, he doesn't give you a whole lot in the run game, which is fine. You know, even though from a zone blocking perspective, he was great last season in Houston, gets an A- for me, but he's a D gap blocker. That's just not what he does. He's a great athlete, fast off the snap, great first step, great hands, late hands. No one really talks about late hands when it comes especially to tackles, but those late hands, you know, preventing yourself from reaching too much, which gets you off balance and everything. He creates a lot of balance there with great feet and great hands, late hands. So I think it's just overall just going to be a perfect addition to this offense. Upgrades this group significantly. He's really what they needed. I mean, especially with Cosmi going down, it really dragged down the offense to a pretty large degree, leading up to Tunsil coming in. Their interior of the offensive line, though, you know, Nick Allegretti will be competing with Brandon Coleman, who's listed as a tackle. He could be starting guard. You know, that's a real competition they have going on right now. I'm okay with either one. It doesn't really change the grade all that much. Got Coleman just a little bit better at pass blocking and a little bit worse at run blocking. Pretty much to me, it doesn't really make all that big of a difference. Tyler Biadasz, great center. He's that high floor center. He's a good high IQ center. He doesn't have like great physical abilities, but he's definitely not that guy who's a liability out there. And I think that when it's a center, if you have a choice, you know, he's not going to be this great physical specimen, but his IQ is going to be really good. He's going to make sure the shifts happen all the way they're supposed to. He's going to make the right decision in pass pro. He's going to be able to get to the second level in run blocking, you know, most of the time the way he's supposed to. That's who you want. And building a good relationship with your quarterback to keep the communication with the offensive line going. Andrew Wiley kicks into guard with the injury to Cosmi, which Wiley, a little swing offensive lineman going back to his days in Kansas City. So he's a decent player to have there at guard. And then there's the rookie Josh Connerly, who they picked up in the first round to play opposite of Tunsil. That was kind of the plan coming in anyway, was for that to be the case. And then Cosme steps in when he's healthy to play guard next to him. But he was pretty damn good at Oregon last season. Only gave up 1 sack and 5 pressures. Took 4 penalties. We'll see how that translates to the pro level, especially shifting over to right tackle. See him in the left tackle stance right there. In the run game, though, he's yuck. Kind of yuck. Not the worst. For a rookie, he's coming in pretty good. Not terrible. Respectable. But I think still, you're not too happy about it. You're not loving it. You could definitely be better, but, most rookies are coming in, especially offensive linemen. They're coming in really good at one thing, and then there's another thing they really need to work on. And I just think the running game is something he's going to have to work on. I could see him becoming a really good pass blocker really quickly. I just think from an athletic standpoint, again, the air raid offense, the fact that there's not going to be a lot of blitzing against them, sort of the same thing for Tunsil. I think it's going to allow him to develop a lot faster, play with more confidence, and Tunsil's going to be there to sort of guide him along the way. It's a really good mentor to have on the opposite side to sort of watch and practice and watch in drills and try to mimic that to the best of your ability to pick up on some of the tendencies that Tunsil has. That's going to be really invaluable to him. The only issue I really have is the lack of depth. Chris Paul is a decent run blocker. Better than some of the guys that they have, but just doesn't have the pass blocking ability. Bobby Hart is just And then Nate Herbig is just like your typical, God, it's okay if he plays for a drive. I hope he doesn't have to start type offensive lineman. So they got some good pieces here in the starting lineup. Depth is a little questionable. You don't know. It's like Sam Cosme, I'm giving him quite the benefit of the doubt here that he's going to be able to contribute at all to this team late in the season. But they did the right thing. They did what they had to do to improve this team, building around your quarterback. Investing in Deebo Samuel, and then coming here and investing in Tunsil and Connerly, getting 2 brand new tackles. It's going to make life a lot easier for Jayden Daniels. And I think it's going to be a huge asset for Jayden Daniels with his caliber of athlete and his caliber of arm talent to play behind an offensive line that does hover around that top 10 pass blocking ability. And an air raid offense, one that wants to put the ball downfield, that wants to be throwing it, this really works for them. So overall, it's my 3rd ranked offense. The number 5 passing offense. They are 17th in rush offense, but that is really just the offensive line. You want to see the offensive line improve and raise that number up, but this is going to be a very dynamic offense yet again. That's going to be able to score a lot of points. It's going to be very exciting to watch. This is contingent on the Terry McLaurin contract situation getting worked out and Deebo Samuel staying as healthy as he can throughout most of the season. If Deebo Samuel goes down early and for a long time, then they can probably drop to more closer to the 10th overall offense. If they lose Terry McLaurin, they could drop significantly here in pass offense. So we'll see how that all turns out. Now let's go to a real wild card here. It's the defensive side of the ball. Dan Quinn, Joe Witt combined here to run this defense. It starts with the defensive line that they've added really nicely to. Von Miller, he's, unfortunately with his age, him coming in here being the best player on this defensive line right out the gate, man, you just wish you got him a little bit sooner. Because, as a pass rusher, he's still great. He's still a great pass rusher. He just only had about 280 snaps last year. And he was 11th in pass rush win rate with 6 sacks and 32 pressures. Still a damn good player, but he did that in Buffalo as part of this rotation, and he had great other players around him, like AJ Epinesa, who was having a great little campaign there. So you just... Him coming in here was clearly just them trying to look for anything, to be honest, because you look at the rest of this group, they don't have the ability Von Miller has. Maybe Von Miller in certain situations can play like a more off-ball traditional linebacker on the outside. You can get away with dropping him into coverage. So he does bring like a little more of an exotic nature to this group that has more just traditional edge players, defensive end types, more so than like 3-4 outside linebacker types like what Von Miller would be. Still has great moves. That's the thing. It's like the one thing that you lose with age, you don't really lose the footwork. You don't lose the hand placement. You don't really lose the instincts. You just lose the physicality. You lose the speed. You lose the stamina. The hands don't work as quick as they used to. The feet aren't moving as quick as they used to. When you get beat up a little bit, pick up an injury here or there, nicks and knocks, they all hurt and linger a little bit longer the older that you get. So I don't know if he's ever really going to be able to use his ability in the run game, which he didn't really use last year. He didn't qualify to be ranked in stops percentage amongst other edge players in the league. But man, he's still such a great asset for this team in this aspect of his game. It's just I can't imagine him being on the field for 900 snaps and being a 3-down edge player. I don't know if they have a 3-down edge player here. Because you look at Dorrance Armstrong, in the run game, you don't want him out there. It's just not what he does. He rushes the passer, and he rushes the passer pretty well. He's a good number 2. He's a high-end number 2 pass rusher. So from that aspect, it really helps raise everything up. But who's going to be on the field on those tough early downs? Dietrich Wise? It's like a hybrid defensive end, 4-eye tech kind of. At least what he played in New England. Cleveland Ferrell, who's this like low ceiling, high floor defensive end now at this point in his career. Jacob Martin, who's just a worse version of Dorrance Armstrong. Trying to figure out where the depth comes into play here, because they are 14th when they have their best players on the field. So for most of the time when they're pass rushing, they're going to be in really good shape. But they are 31st in run defense for that reason. Is what are they putting out there on the edge? And really, what are they putting out there on the interior either? This is what I was talking about before with Dan Quinn. Making similar personnel mistakes to what he did in Dallas when he was defensive coordinator there. Is what do you have going on in the interior? Now, they have Javon Kinlaw. He's coming over after stints with San Francisco and the New York Jets. Who's had a damn good season last year as a number 2 interior pass rusher. Next to Quinnen Williams. Did pretty damn good. Played a lot of B gaps, a lot of 4-eye tech here. So it was a lot of 3 and 4-eye tech lineups. Not a lot of true like nose tackle 2, 1 tech, 0 tech lineups. Which that doesn't need to be his game. You got players on this roster that can be that instead. But is he just like this 1-year wonder? Now that he's being put in this position where he's got to be probably the best interior pass rusher on the team, he's just, he's like Dorrance Armstrong. He's just he's a really good number 2 pass rusher at his position. You get into what he does in the run game, and it's just not great. He's just not somebody that you get excited about being on the field, but he's pretty much put himself in a position where he might have to be the 3-down interior defensive lineman. Just out of necessity. Because then you look at who he's got next to him, and you got Daron Payne, who, to me, notoriously overrated. Hasn't been all that great in a long time, especially since he got his extension. But he's like the nose tackle of this group. He was the guy that they brought in the first round to complement Jonathan Allen as more of like a hard-nosed traditional interior defensive tackle. And he was that for a while, but he's sort of just been on a downward trend over the last couple of seasons, by my estimation. That's why last year in the second round, you got Johnny Newton, who did better, I think, as a run defender than I expected. But he's still not great. He's the 5th ranked run defender on the team for me. So I think on these early down situations, Sheldon Day, I could see Sheldon Day getting more snaps than Johnny Newton. Maybe Deron Payne's the odd one out here, like in a surprising move, like a big cap savings move. Eat some dead money, but free up some good cap room. And you let Sheldon Day and Javon Kinlaw and Johnny Newton be your rotation. You got Eddie Goldman in there, who, sort of been under the radar for a long time now since leaving Chicago. But he's found his way onto the roster again. I don't know how much he's going to play. But I think if they give him a chance, he's got at least some upside to him. It's just a weird defensive line rotation here. In really all aspects. Because as much as Von Miller is going to be a featured star here, like, can he sustain the level of production he's had as a pass rusher at his age with the amount of miles he has on him? I don't know. Like, would anyone be surprised if Von Miller just kind of fell off and wasn't very good and kind of struggled and didn't have the stamina? Like, would that surprise anyone at this point? He's been in the league a long time. It's been a long time for Von Miller. Playing a really tough position to have longevity in as well. This isn't like the 1980s or 90s when Reggie White played forever. Bruce Smith played forever. Is Dorrance Armstrong going to be able to repeat what he did as an edge rusher? Or is he going to regress back down to kind of what he was in Dallas, which was like a good number 3 guy? You don't really have a candidate here that's going to be like this breakout edge rushing star. It's a lot of veteran players, so they targeted the high floor strategy with the potential that as long as the veterans can sort of sustain the high level of play they've had in the past, that you're going to look really okay. But there's a world where this is in the top 20 pass rush group. There's a real likelihood in that. And there's a even better one that they're the worst run defense group. So the work is really cut out for Joe Witt and Dan Quinn here with this group. Because it's the one weakness here, and it's the one weakness that I'm shocked they did very little to address in the offseason. Like, bringing in Dietrich Wise and a veteran like Von Miller, that's fine. But where's the long-term development guy here? Like a blue chip guy that you get in the second round. They had to take Connerly in the first round. I'm not arguing that. But where was the dedication to this group here? It's like they just never came. And they went, we'll just get Von Miller. We'll add a couple of veteran pieces on the interior like Sheldon Day and Javon Kinlaw. And this will work. Get rid of Jonathan Allen. Replace him with Javon Kinlaw. Worst case scenario, it's par for the course. It was a weird strategy. It was a very weird offseason strategy. And I wonder if this is all going to make it blow up in their face, because there's got a lot of potential for that. Good thing they got some linebackers that know how to blitz. And what a great linebacker group it is with Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu. They come in as, 13th or 14th-ish in coverage, but my second best run defending linebacker group. This significantly helps the 31st ranked defensive line run defense. It really boosts it up. It's really a great security blanket there at the second level that is going to protect these guys who were now at the interior defensive line. You can maybe scheme them up to be much more gap disciplined, and then allow veterans like Louvu and Wagner to find and shoot the gaps that are opened up for them and blow up plays and prevent long runs. That has to be the strategy at this point based upon the roster building. But Bobby Wagner coming off a great season, to me, it also kind of falls in the same category as Von Miller. Like, there's a lot of hoping that this high level of play is just going to be sustained. Which, best case scenario, hell yeah, you got great veteran players here. And yeah, Bobby Wagner's a little bit better and a safer option as being a 3-down player. As your green dot linebacker, sure, absolutely. Good blitzer, still good in coverage. Less than 100% passer rating when targeted. Still very good. Surprisingly good. A pretty sure tackler, just about 5% missed tackle rate. He can get that under 5% though. And I think just being in a defense that allows him to play with some intelligence, that allows him to he's a great communicator. He knows how to put everyone in place. Even though the physical traits kind of, slowly start to diminish to a degree, he's still able to perform at such a high level because of how much smarter he is than everybody else. Smarter than the opposing offensive players for the most part. Which is why he's able to anticipate what they're going to do, which makes him so good against the run. Because he's able to play with a high level of anticipation in the run game that boosts up and hides a lot of the deficiencies of what's going on in front of him. And that's the hope that's going to happen here. And then mixing up with Frankie Louvu, who's sort of like this hybrid 3-4 outside linebacker who really settled into being like a traditional off-ball linebacker in those like last year or two in Carolina. And his ability as a blitzing threat, because he's so quick. He has such a great first step on the blitz. He blitzes with such great anticipation that he does add an aspect to the pass rush here that can protect what they have in terms of a rotation. Now, he's not going to line up as a defensive end for you and be like this great edge rusher. That's not what he's going to do. He's going to be that guy who's going to disguise his blitz, who you won't blitz for 7, 8, 9 plays at a time. And then on that 9th or 10th play, he's going to hit that gap, and you think you're going to have him on some play action pass, and he's going to blow up the entire thing. Because he's going to see that he's going to have the good eyes that is going to see that I don't need to worry about the running back even if he does get the ball. This scheme is specific for me to blow up the quarterback, and I'm just going to target the quarterback. He's going to blow it up more often than not. Just a great blitzing threat. They don't have depth here at linebacker, though. Kane Medrano, a rookie, could get some playing time. I think he's sort of being brought in as this. He's being brought in as the guy they're going to groom to eventually replace Bobby Wagner, whenever that may be. But I'm really, I'd be really happy with this group if I was Washington fans. You just, again, you worry about regression. You worry about regression coming fast from very physical players in physically demanding positions. So there is that threat that sort of just lingers there on the periphery, but just, why be negative? Why think negatively? Think positively. What a great group. Top 5 linebacker group in the league. And now, like the roller coaster ride from hell, we're back to more like, oh boy, what do we have here? It's the secondary, and they're 25th for me in coverage, 30th in run support. It's uninspiring. My God, close your eyes and hope for the best that they're going to be good group. They got Marshawn Lattimore last year, who needed a change of scenery, definitely, from his time in New Orleans. Gave up 87.3 passer rating, 5 penalties on about 500 snaps. Targeted 24 times. He was really good in man coverage. Could have been better in zone. Above average. But he hasn't played with that dynamic enthusiasm of a number 1 corner, like an elite level corner, in some time now. So you wonder if you're kind of getting him here at the end of it. It's the same thing you're thinking about with Von Miller. Marshawn Lattimore is much younger than Von Miller. But you still sort of have that feeling like, can he get back to what he was and how much can he contribute? Because the expectation is he's going to be the cornerback 1 here. Outside corner, pair up against the team's best guy, whether it be Malik Neighbors or A.J. Brown or CeeDee Lamb. That's his guy. Does he have the ability to do that at this stage? I'm not sure that he does. I think that he's going to be very reliant on what the front 7 are doing to speed up the offense's process for him so he can remain in man coverage. He can play a little bit more tighter on the receiver, not have to worry about keeping up with them all that much, and can avoid facing a lot of double moves, and then he can play in a pretty decent role there. What they did do in the second round, which I really liked, is they picked up Trey Amos from Ole Miss. It's going to be your outside corner 2. And you're really, really banking. He had a 56 passer rating in college. It's last year in college, given up 10 pass breakups. Gave up 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Pretty decent season. Pretty damn good season. 31 receptions on 58 targets. He was better in zone than he was in man. When I look at Trey Amos and I go, he's got all the traits to be a really good corner kind of quickly in the league, which is why he comes in with the 76 rating. I could see him being somebody who, plays well enough where you're kind of comfortable with him from time to time covering a team's number 1 receiver. I don't know that you'll love it when it's in your division and it's a number 1 receiver, because you got 3 of the top 7 or 8 wide receivers in the league playing in your division, that's a rough go for a group not that strong. And that's banking on some development here and some veterans playing with a high floor level of play. But I do think Amos, long term projects really well. I think he's got all the traits of what makes a great cornerback, from tangibles to intangibles, size, length, all that crap. Good speed. Understands contact. Only took 3 penalties on nearly 800 snaps. So that's a hell of a performance. 10 breakups, only 3 penalties. That's a hell of a performance for a corner. We'll see what he does when that level of competition gets ramped up here, but all things pointing up for him. Then you got Mike Sanders still, who's going to be your slot guy. Played more outside corner than you would have liked, because he came into the league kind of like this traditional nickel slot corner. Now with Lattimore and Trey Amos there, he can really settle into that spot. Jonathan Jones coming in as well. He can be a good outside corner substitution there. So it's going to really allow Sanders still to settle into that slot corner role, which I think he's really going to be at his best. Now in the division, that means playing up against CeeDee Lamb a little bit there. So that's going to be a matchup to watch. But I think for the most part, he's got the physical traits. He's pretty, he has all the things I just said about Trey Amos, with the good hand placement, good feet control, good balance. Had a really good season last year, where the expectations of him probably weren't that high in a group that wasn't really all that good. But I think now when you have these well-established outside guys who can play outside, it allows him to really focus on that role as a slot guy where he's really at his best, so he can really outperform the 76th grade. I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the better slot corners in the entire league by the end of the season. From a depth perspective at corner, Noah Igbenogany, Bobby Price, Antonio Hamilton are all there. I don't particularly see these threats out there. Jonathan Jones is a really good veteran to have out, coming from the Belichick defense. He can play left corner, left slot, right slot. So he's a really good swing piece for you to have, especially in those dime situations. He's a great player to have. He's a decent cornerback 3 type for me. So him being the 4th best corner on this team is a really good spot to be in. There's just not a high ceiling on this group right now. You gave into the back end here. They brought in Will Harris. Pretty good coverage safety. Not so great against the run. Then you get Quan Martin, who, settled in a decent way here. He's going to be that deep center field safety for you. Took 200 snaps outside of that, but 725 pure safety snaps. Only had 2 pass breakups, 2 touchdowns allowed though, 1 interception. Was only targeted 22 times. So he had about a 50-something% catch allowed rate, which is pretty damn good, 250 yards. So they were whipping the ball downfield on him. He was doing pretty damn good when he was targeted, I must say. I think he's trending upwards. I say the same thing for him that I say for Mike Sanders still. I think he's got all the right things in place here, that the trend is upwards. It's just going to take some time here, especially when you're playing with a group in front of you, a front 4 that you're not that confident is going to provide a really consistent, good pass rush for you. So it's going to leave a lot of these guys sort of hanging out to dry a lot, forced to chase guys around, which is kind of going to force Dan Quinn to maybe play some more zone than he wants to in certain scenarios, just to account for that. And I think that's going to allow some of the smarter, more developed offenses in the league to find gaps in the zones and all that. So that could become an issue for this group. But it's what drags down this team, and it's what has hurt them all last year was the fact that they got into these shootout situations and they couldn't run the ball to put away, but this defense couldn't make a big play on the back end to save the team. They couldn't really pull their end of the bargain, which I guess, yeah, that's why you go and get Lattimore. That's why you draft Trey Amos and you sign Jonathan Jones. You bring in Will Harris is because you're trying to fix that. Now you just don't have, you didn't bring in like these super high-end guys that were playing at these high-end levels. You're bringing in projects. You're bringing in veterans with low ceilings and high floors. This is the group that has to be watched throughout this year. And I feel like this group is going to be, unfortunately, the reason why they lose the games they're going to lose. So overall, my 22nd ranked defense, 21st against the pass, 20th against the run. They're right around that bottom 10-ish defense. That's where they live. Just, bottom 10-ish. Either just outside, they'll easily be just outside of it as they will be deep inside of it. I'll say that. They have the makings where it could be one of the worst defenses in the league, like a bottom 5. But I think if they can scheme things up right, they get some quick player development here. Von Miller plays a little bit better than with more longevity, then they can find their way into being a top 20 overall defense, which when you have an offensive dynamic, that's kind of maybe all you need. You just need a defense that's capable of making a big stop late in the game, and I'm not sure that the pieces there exist. Running through their schedule here, and despite it being the 8th hardest schedule in the league, they had a pretty damn good draw as to where they're playing the really difficult teams here. Like Detroit and Denver, they get them both at home. They get Seattle at home. They get the Raiders at home. They get Chicago at home. They did draw Green Bay, the Chargers, and Kansas City on the road, which is a bummer because they are better than the Chargers now at this point. I think they match up a lot better against the Chargers now that Rashawn Slater is out also. But that's a push-em game having to go on the road for that, especially being on the road the week before with Atlanta. But, you still get within your division. I think they're better than Dallas by a wide margin. As long as they can find a way to not get into a back-and-forth shootout with the Cowboys, I think they match up pretty well against them. Especially on the offensive side of the ball, they match up incredibly well. I think they're able to put up a lot of points. The Giants, they match up pretty well too. It'll be interesting to see what the Giants look like, because in the preseason they've looked pretty good, but it is preseason. Philly's always going to be tough for you. Catching Minnesota on the road sucks. You wish you maybe got them at home. Miami late in the year, that's pretty good. So 9.5 wins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 games there that I go, that's a win for them. So they need to find one extra win in there between 2 games against Philly, Minnesota, Denver, Detroit, Green Bay, Chargers, and Kansas City. All very difficult games for them, but they should be able to find one win there. So bet the over. Bet 10 wins. Bet 10 or more wins for sure. They are my 7th ranked team with the 3rd best offense, 22nd ranked defense, and the 14th ranked head coach. Lots of potential here. Lots of potential. Lots of opportunities for growth. They're going to need that growth to happen on the defense. And they just need some sustainability and consistency to carry over from last year on the offense. Good stuff. Really good stuff, Washington fans.
There you have it. Perhaps my number 7 team in the 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Washington Commanders, pending the Terry McLaurin contract situation. Appreciate you guys being here. We're really getting down to the wire. So leave in the comment section who you think my number 1 team is going to be. I don't know. Maybe it's obvious. I don't know. I don't think it is. Maybe it will be. We'll find out, I guess, right? And leave in the comment section what you think of the Washington Commanders. Am I too high on them? Am I too low on them? Is Terry McLaurin really that much of a game breaker where it would affect their rankings so significantly? I don't know. You tell me. I feel like I laid it out pretty well. And I will see you guys with the next video next time.